Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kristen and this is my little corner of the internet where I share with you how knitting and other fiber crafts have woven into my life. I am a knitter living in Denver, Colorado with my family, which includes my husband and our two animals, Sherlock and Ebony. And today's video is episode 87 of my podcast, where this is my February of 2026 recap, where I'm going to share with you my finished objects, works in progress. And yeah, just kind of wanted to sit down today, chat about what I've been making, and just kind of hang out together. I feel like that's what I'm needing today, is just a nice little hangout session. So if you're feeling similar, I hope you have something to work on, and let's just hang out for the next little bit and I will share all about my making. As always, if you'd like to find me other places, I am Knit Life Balance on all the social medias. My link tree is linked down below where you can connect with me on YouTube, Instagram, Ravelry, Blue Sky, all of those types of places. The link tree is the easiest because then you can kind of click that one place and it'll take you to all the different interweb places that I share on. Also, as always, in the description box down below, I have show notes with chapter codes, so feel free to jump around, or if you ever need to revisit a section, it should all be down there so that you can kind of pop around. And all of my Ravelry project pages, when I talk about a project, I include the list of any video where I talk about that project so you can kind of see a long progression of any project. So that's another way to kind of pop around, see if there's anything you missed or you want to know. That's a great way to do it as well. So I do have a little bit of life stuff that I was thinking about sharing here at the beginning. It's just at the top of my mind, so I figured I just want to chat about it today. If you don't care about life stuff, again, use the chapter codes down below. You can just jump ahead to the knitting if you'd like. I don't have a ton of life stuff, but just wanted to talk about, I have finished my first class of my master's program. I'm going back to school to get my master's in accounting. I have finished the first class. It has gone well. I'm kind of in this accelerated kind of program, so each class is 8 weeks instead of like a traditional longer semester, and just means I can kind of, all of my classes are pretty sequential. There's none that I can kind of take at the same time because they all kind of stack and learn on top of each other. So the first 8 weeks is done. This past week has been essentially maybe kind of like spring break. I have a week between classes. Next class starts next week, but this past week has been nice to kind of decompress, you know, kind of get into a little bit of a recovery before jumping into the next class. So like that feels really good. I feel like I've kind of gotten a flow of how classes are going and how to kind of fit it into my routine and how to kind of fit and balance like knitting. So all in all, it's going well. I will say I do think this monthly video situation is helping instead of every 2 weeks. I am a little later recording in March than I traditionally would have wanted, but last week was just a week where I just needed to veg out and like not use my brain, and so that is what I did last week. I like slept and turned my brain off completely. So this week, after having a week of like no school and being able to recharge, like today feels really good, and I feel really excited to share all the things I finished with you because I have more than I anticipated. Like when I look at what I have, I'm like, wow, I've done a lot in the month of February. Also, February was just, it is such a short month compared to others. It's, you know, it's only 2 to 3 days shorter than other months, but it just feels like it's flying. It feels crazy that we're already in March and we're like 2 weeks into March at this point. So that's just kind of where I'm at. Also, time change really hit me hard this week. I am a person that always needs a lot of sleep, but this time, the time change, I have just not been able to drag myself out of bed in the mornings. So, are we all annoyed with that? Because I'm still annoyed with it. I wish we could just decide and just like not change the clocks anymore, because I find that jump just like really hard to navigate. And yeah, otherwise, over the past month or so, I've just had a good amount of like networking. I had a conference that I went to, which I was able to take a sock to that. It was a day conference here in Denver, and that went really well, but also just doing a little more networking with a local women's accounting group, getting involved with them, helping out with that. So some of my social battery has also just kind of gone to some other things. Hence, again, probably why I took a little bit of a break last weekend instead of recording. So I hope if you're still around and if you're hanging out for this journey, I appreciate you being here. I am excited to share. And so the last thing I have before jumping into what I have finished is what I'm wearing today. I am wearing my Staffin cardigan, which is a pattern that I test knit for the Crayabea. I knit this in Lion Brand's Fisherman's Wool in the lightest color of Fisherman's Wool. It's like the beige color. And overall, I probably knit this cardigan a little too big. It's a little more of a jacket. It's definitely a little bit of an oversized fit for me. And like many people in many places, we have really not had winter this year. I think we've had like one real day of snow, and that was like probably 2 to 6 inches depending on what part of the area you were in. And then literally the next day it was 70 degrees out, so all of the snow melted. So I've not really had a lot of opportunities to wear knit sweaters this winter. So it's been a little cooler this week, not a ton. I think we're in like the 50s to 60s range. So I've kind of been using my Staffin as I'm kind of like a sweatshirt person. I like sweatshirts. So instead of grabbing a sweatshirt, I've been trying to grab this cardigan, and it's been working out well. So that way when it's a little chillier, if the wind's kicking up or in the mornings, I can kind of wear this cardigan, and then, or if the office or my home is cold. But when it inevitably warms up to the point where I need to remove a layer, I can remove a cardigan compared to sweaters. So this has gotten a good amount of wear over the last week or so. And I do find it very comfortable, but I do think it's definitely more of a jacket fit for me than like a cardigan fit, just because it's a little big, but in like a comfy way. So yes, that is what I'm wearing. That is what I've been up to at a very high level overview. But as I mentioned at the beginning, I do have a good amount of things that I've finished. So we'll just go ahead and move right on over to finished objects. So my first finished object, I am hoping is not a surprise, but I have finished Shane's So Basic DK, which I started in November of 2025 and finished as of February 14th. If you saw, I also did a vlog for this sweater, so if you'd like to check it out, I'll link it up in the thingy up here, but just a little bit of my process of knitting this. That vlog was supposed to have a little bit more b-roll, but somehow I lost a lot of footage of like when we were going out to the hot springs or when I was blocking this. I don't know what happened, but you get some of my ramblings about it. So if you'd like a little bit of that, feel free to check out that video. But overall, this sweater is done and I am so excited about how it looks. Shane has already taken it and claimed it. I had to steal it out of the closet today in order to record because I did finish this about a month ago when I'm filming this today. So I didn't want to like necessarily hoard it until I recorded. But I did make him, he couldn't have it until I took photos of him. So I do have some photos to share of him wearing it. He's worn it a few times. He's kind of just worn it around the house as well. But I love how it looks. Overall, this is a DK weight raglan sweater. It's designed by Maxim Cyr. I knit it in Les Garçons British DK, which is a BFL and Masham blend DK weight. The colorway is Vincent's Highland Coup, and I'm pretty sure it's designed for like a typical masculine body, and that's the size chart. And then there is also this raglan detail of the ribbing going down the sleeve. Max also has a fingering weight version, so that's why this one is called the So Basic DK. And overall, I followed the pattern pretty exactly. The biggest modifications I made was I did start after the collar, came back, picked it up, and then knit the collar at the end. I tend to do that with all of my sweaters. I like to have just a little more control over how high up a collar goes. And then I also, if you remember initially, I had knit the body and then had some trouble with the length. What ended up happening is I did have to add a little more length, but not any more length in the pattern. So the body of the sweater is actually knit to the recommended length of the pattern. And then I did do the 2 inches of 1x1 ribbing. And all of my hems, the bottom hem, the cuffs, and the collar are all finished with a tubular bind off. I really like a tubular bind off and how it looks with a 1x1 rib. I don't do it on 2x2 because I don't like having to do like the cross. For a 2x2 I will do a different bind off, but for 1x1s I do really like the tubular. It does take a little bit, but honestly it doesn't bother me too much. It's just like grafting, kind of get into a flow. I don't mind it at all. And then on the end side, I did sew in this tag. It says, this is the back. I think this is a Kylie and the Machine label. I have a pack of like 6 of these. I just sewed it in with some embroidery thread. Yes, it is crooked, which bothers me slightly, but not enough to fix it. I also still haven't figured out like the best way to sew these on. I sewed it with embroidery thread, but it doesn't look super neat. So I'm still trying to figure that out. When I sewed these on with sewing patterns, it's a little easier because you can kind of tuck it like in a waistband in a seam. So yeah, I mean, I guess I probably could have used a thread that was a little closer in color or a little less strands of embroidery floss, but it's okay. I mostly just needed to sew this on so that Shane knows which direction to put this sweater on as. But overall, I'm very happy with how this came out. The other modification I made is I did not do, there's supposed to be decreases before you do this hem. I had done it the first time around when I knit it too short. I had Shane try it on and there was just like a big mushroom effect that was happening. I might have mentioned that in the last episode. I definitely mentioned it in my vlog. So essentially, I just did not do that. I think it looks nice. I don't think I needed like that cinch in at the bottom. So I did not do that. So yarn wise, I did knit this on US 5 needles, and overall I used 539 grams, or a little less than 6 skeins, or 1,400 yards or so. I think it came out really well. I think this yarn blooms really nicely after it's been blocked. You can kind of see that. There's a video clip I have before I blocked it, after I had blocked the top portion but not the bottom, where you could really see a difference in how the pre-blocked part versus the bottom looked really different. Like the pre-blocked part was much plumper, fuller, versus the unblocked part. You could definitely see it was a little more see-through, a little easier to, I don't know, it just like wasn't as plump. So I do think this yarn blooms quite a bit with blocking, and Shane's been wearing it. He's been really enjoying it. I really enjoyed knitting this sweater. I mean, it's a basic raglan, but I think the details of like the raglan sleeve and the seam and this sleeve, like this sleeve detail, the ribbing, I think looks so slick and nice. I just really enjoy it. The most like, what is the word? The most like thought I had to put into the pattern was how to handle the sleeve decreases under the arm, because the ribbing detail goes all the way around the sleeve. I did have to play around with how I wanted to handle the sleeve decreases and the ribbing. And overall what I ended up deciding is whenever I did a decrease, the ribbing was essentially a 5x1, essentially what I did is, if decreasing made it to where I had more than 5 knit stitches in a row, I kept the purl stitch where it was. And then basically whenever I got to a decrease point where I would have 5 knit stitches from a rib stitch or a purl stitch, that is when I would decrease out a purl stitch. Hope that kind of makes sense. At first what I ended up doing is I like decreased out this rib stitch really early, and I had like 12 stitches in a row of knit stitches, and I didn't like that. So that's why I decided I'm gonna keep the purl stitch even though I have like just one here, but I then kept it all the way up like this. And then once I got to a decrease point right here where it was 5 knit stitches in a row, that's when I decreased out that purl, and then kind of kept it just like that. So I think that worked out okay. I like how that looked. Kind of just had to play around with it a little bit, but I'm happy with how it turned out. So that is my first finished object for the month, the So Basic DK for Shane. My next few finished objects, I have a few things that aren't necessarily knitting, but are things that I finished. So the next one is this cross stitch from Junebug and Darling. And you may or may not remember this because I started this in May of 2025 and finished it in February of 2026. So I had this kind of on the go for quite a while. I obviously was not working on it the entire time. What I did last month to kind of motivate me is I had done these bottom 2 moths, but not the top one. So I go to a knitting group once a month at IKEA here in Denver, and so I took it and I stitched this entire top moth that morning. Finished it within that 2-hour group. Maybe we stayed for like 2.5 hours or so, but I finished it, came home, washed it, and then it sat for like another 2 weeks before I did the finishing on the back, which is embarrassing. I just kept putting it off. So finally, basically I got motivated to finish this before this recording, because I was like, there is no way I'm not having this done by the time I record this video. So I had washed it, I had stretched it, the fabric. I followed Junebug's and Darling's instructions for finishing. I think they were written really well. Essentially, you just take the fabric out of the hoop, you put it in a bowl of, you know, some warmish water with a little bit of soap. You let it soak for a little bit. You put it in a towel like you do with knitting, roll it up, kind of press it, get some of the extra water out. Then you put it in your hoop while it's still a little bit damp, stretch it, and let it dry. Which that's part I haven't done before. Normally I let things dry flat, like all these embroideries. But the stretching and putting in the frame was kind of nice for when you go to the next part of the finishing. The biggest thing though was like getting it lined up. But once you do that, you then take it out. There's a little bit of batting on the inside. So you take it out of the hoop, layer the finished cross stitch with the batting into the hoop, and then you do the finishing where you kind of cut off the extra fabric around. You then do a running stitch, pull it tight, and then you cut out your felt. Actually, you cut out the felt earlier, but you cut out the felt and then you kind of whip stitch all the way around the edges in order to finish it off. My thoughts about the finishing are, one, I somehow ended up with a pucker right here. I don't even know if you'll be able to see it. It's right above that top moth. I think that was from me cinching the fabric. I think it cinched weird, so there's just like a slight pucker, or I could have tightened it a little bit more, but now I can't because of how I've sewn it on. I also just don't know how important like the batting layer is. So the batting is then now put between this fabric So it's Aida fabric, batting, hoop. Maybe it's more of a cross stitch thing, so like you can't see through any of like the Aida holes. I just don't know how important that is or if I would include it in the future. The other thing is I'm definitely a little puffed here on the back. I think that's partly from the Aida, or maybe I could have cut off a little more fabric. So whenever I hang this up, like I'm gonna hang it over here with these other ones, I'll just have to make sure my nail's out a little farther to accommodate kind of the extra fabric at the back. I do think my felt stitching has gotten a little bit better. At first you can see I was doing these all very close, and then I kind of spread them out a little bit more, and I think the spread out looks a little bit cleaner. I think my felt sewing could be a little bit neater, but also I think it's just a way to make the back look a little prettier, and it's always going to be facing like this. So does it really matter? Probably not. I'm excited this is done. I love these little moths. I have a ton of embroidery floss left. I bought the kit for a June Bug and Darling, and those kits include the full like skeins of embroidery floss. So I have a ton left over. I could essentially go buy more Aida fabric and probably stitch this a few more times, probably 2 or 3 more times. I mean, it's a really small and quick embroidery or cross stitch project. So I did keep the pattern. I have the leftover skeins of floss, so I'll probably keep it. You know, if anyone ever comes over and they're like, oh my god, it's so cute, I could always make another. I mean, you could make it with more color iterations, but I think it's fun. I think it's cute, and it will be going over here on the wall like this. Ta-da! It's just a little embarrassing how long I kept this lingering for. I probably should have finished it a little earlier, but you know, things ebb and flow, but this cross stitch is finally done. My next finished object is some spinning. So I have finally finished my fiber for my jaunty spin. So I have 2 skeins. I've pulled this one out so we can kind of look at the colors. I was also getting my wraps per inch, but this is what it looks like. So this is Hello Yarns Dreaming in Starlight. It is a BFL, and it was a custom color for Tour de Fleece for Stitches in Starlight and Flannels and Pearls. They did like a collab with Hello Yarn. So it's like purples and oranges and blues, kind of like a winter, or not a winter, summer, dark night camping, but like blows up like a campfire. I just think it's a really, really beautiful color. I spun this on my Starling, which is my e-spinner. And I think this is my thinnest spin I've been able to complete. So overall I split it in half. I did a 2-ply. Kind of fractally, but kind of not. I split the first half into 8 sections and the other half into 6 sections. I wanted longer color repeats. And then I spun it pretty thin. I just did my wraps per inch now that it's done. It's been blocked, it's been soaked, it's done. And I'm getting about 15 wraps per inch. So this is pretty much a fingering weight yarn. And like looking at it, I think that looks pretty spot on. You know, there's definitely spots that lean a little more lace, maybe a little heavier to sport. But overall, I do think that this is pretty close to a fingering weight. So I will be knitting this Jaunty by Andrea Mowry for a very long time, and I will be using some pretty small needles. I do think the color is just gorgeous, and I'm very excited that this is done. The plying took me days. I had done the 2 singles. They rested for a little bit. I started another spin. Finally, I was like, okay, I'm gonna apply these. I started, I think, maybe on like a Sunday night. I like started when I could like think straight, get some prep done, you know. And I started applying, and I applied in the evenings from like Sunday night until probably Wednesday or Thursday night. I mean, it took a long time, which is how I was like, okay, I think I got quite a bit of yardage, because I mean, I was plying forever and ever and ever. So I had quite a bit of yardage to get through. I think I applied about 20-degree spin. That's kind of what I'm shooting for. So I did do some pre-washing measurements. I just did that quick 15 wraps per inch. Maybe editing Kristen here can put on what my final wraps per inch and final yardage estimate is. And yes, this is hopefully, this jaunty's going to be on my needles pretty soon. Andrea Mowry is currently having her March to May knit along. So I think this would be a fun project to kind of like have as a part of that. That was kind of like my motivation to be like, all right, I'm finally going to apply these. Because if I can apply it and get it washed, I can go ahead and start that shawl. I do think I might need to get something off the needles first, but maybe not. Maybe I'll just go ahead and cast this on. I'm not sure 100% if these are my colors, but I do think they're really, really gorgeous. So this is my jaunty spin. I do think these bloomed also nicely. I think BFL just has a tendency to bloom. So this is done. I'm very excited. I do think it will kind of be my colors. I think the orange is like just enough that it's a pop, but not like overwhelming. And I think the jewel tones are really, really pretty. So because it's a fingering weight though, I'm going to be using like the smallest needles recommended for the jaunty, and it's probably going to take me a while to knit. So maybe I should just go ahead and cast it on. But that is my finished spinning. Very exciting. This was, I did have 8 ounces total, so I got like 2 bumps worth so that I could have at least 200 grams or so of fiber. My next spin, I am trying to spin a little bit thicker because I think I'd like to land a little bit closer to a sport to DK. I like this kind of range of fingering to DK-ish. I do think sport's kind of a nice happy medium where you can kind of go either way with projects. And I hope it would spin up a little faster. Spinning that thin took a long time. Like the spinning took a long time, the plying took a long time. I started this spin in October. It is now March. So, I mean, I wasn't doing it like every day. But if we spun a little bit thicker, we could spin a little bit quicker. However, I do like to eke out as much yardage as I can. So it's a fine line that we're trying to balance here. I do think my yardage has increased. I think kind of I did a little more fiber prep with that. I steamed it out when I was prepping the fiber, and I've been really cognizant in order to like make sure that I try to draft the entire staple length, because some of my previous hand spuns, which used to live up there, but I've put them in the closet now, a lot of them are a little dense. So I have been trying to like eke out a little bit more yardage from my fiber, and I do think I've kind of gotten a little happier medium there. So yeah, I mean, I kind of like the fingering weight. I just think maybe just like a smidge thicker might be a little nicer for my hands, the spinning process in general. Okay, we are on to my final finished object, and it is a pair of socks. So I needed a pair of socks. What was it for? Socks are kind of like my on-the-go meeting type of project at this point. I'm trying not to keep them as like a main priority, but it's mostly like I do want to just have a pair of socks on the needle so that when I go to things, I have socks and they are ready to go. I don't remember what I started these for. Maybe it was a movie. But I did start a pair of socks. I needed a pair of socks. I didn't have a pair of socks. I ended up knitting the second sock during my conference and a training that we did. But I decided to try out a new heel. So this is the Vanilla is the New Black sock. Essentially, I mean, I kind of used my vanilla sock recipe and then added in the Vanilla is the New Black heel. So I ended up grabbing some of my oldest sock yarn in order to make this. I think I mentioned it in my 2026 goals video, because I am trying to prioritize using some of my oldest stash. So what I ended up doing is I did go through my stash in Ravelry, figured out which ones were the oldest, and I put on my Regia, my oldest Regia. I need to do a stash tour still, but I have storage tubs of my Regia. And so I put all the oldest ones in one storage tub and they're at the front. The newer Regia is in the back so that the older stuff is in front, so I see it a little bit more. I also pulled out some of my oldest like hand-dyed skeins and they're up here, and then some of this other yarn is like a sweater I'm currently working on and some other like I'd like to knit with this yarn soon, I have project ideas type stuff. So this is one of my oldest Regia skeins that I got when we were living in Germany. It is the colorway 4898. So a very, very lovely color. It looked like this in the skein. And then knit up like this. So kind of like a heathered, stripey kind of effect. And as I mentioned, this was my first time doing the Vanilla is the New Black heel. So you do like these like increases for the heel, and then essentially it's like a longer heel turn. I will admit this heel took my brain a little bit to understand. And that's because like I really want to understand like the math behind a heel flap or whatever heel I'm doing. So for example, a heel flap, you knit on the half of your stitches. So if you have a 60 stitch sock, you typically knit like a 30 stitch heel flap. And then typically for that, your length of the heel flap is that number of rows. So like a standard, we'll say, I think most people knit a 64 stitch sock. I just knit a 30 stitch sock or a 60 stitch sock. So for a 64 stitch sock, you would knit a 32 stitch heel flap with 32 rows. And normally with the slip stitch, it's a knit row per row. So you do 16 repeats or 32 rows. So that's kind of like the math behind it. For like a German short row, you knit it on the second half of your sock. So we'll say 60 stitches. You knit a German short row heel over 30 stitches. And you normally do the short rows back and forth for about a third on each side. So I would do a 30 stitch heel, a third on each side. So a third would be 10, 10, 10. So you have 10 short rows, a 10 in the middle that are unworked, and then 10 double stitches. And that's kind of like the math behind a short row. So I really wanted to understand the math of like this strong heel. And so I did pick it up. Essentially, I mean, this is a 30 stitch, 60 stitch sock, 30 stitch heel. You basically increase 30 stitches to get a 30 stitch heel. You center it and you increase out, and then you do your short row heel turn to get back down to 30 stitches. That is a very oversimplified, but it did take me a little bit to understand that. I mean, I think the math is really nice. Just the first time around, I didn't put a marker to kind of designate where my so if you're knitting magic loop, you know what stitches are your front stitches and you know what stitches are your back stitches. And when I do like a German short row heel, it's very easy because you're just decreasing and then you increase back out until your first double stitches. But for this, I really needed stitch markers to designate like this is where my back begins and this is where the back ends, like the back stitches, because you are doing so many increases. And then to like understand the stitch count, I really needed that. And the first time around I did not use my stitch markers, and so then I was trying to like redo the math of like where my stitch marker would have been if I had placed it. So that would be my recommendation. Make sure you mark where your heel is beginning and ending so it's easier to understand. The other thing that kind of I got confused is for the heel turn, you keep doing it and the instructions said to do it until you had like 3 stitches left on each end. And I thought it was 3 stitches left of this ribbing. And I was like, I am nowhere near the stitch count that the pattern is saying. But no, there's 3 stitches left like all the way across, like through the back of the heel. So that was the other thing that confused me. Once I got it, like the second heel went much smoother. I knew what I was doing. It made a lot more sense. So yeah, I think that would be my recommendation if you were doing this heel for the first time. Use stitch markers to designate where your back heel is beginning and ending, or if you're doing on magic loop, you won't have that problem. But I knit these on 9-inch circulars, hence why I needed stitch markers. Otherwise, I did knit these for Shane. I knit them on a US 0. I did 60 stitches. I have tried on this heel for myself, and I think it is kind of a really nice fitting heel. It's very deep. It's quite comfortable. So yeah, we'll see what Shane thinks about it. He likes every heel. Every time I'm like, what do you think about how they fit? He's like, they're socks, they fit. And I'm like, cool. So I am knitting a pair of socks for myself now with this. I will be showing that in a moment. But these socks are done. And this is funny because I started them in February and I finished them this morning. So these were on and off very quickly, but I mean, like I said, I had networking, I had meetings, I had training. So these were kind of just in my backpack a lot this month. I pulled them out a lot and I was able to get a lot of knitting done. I think the day that I had the all-day conference, I had knit the cuff the evening before. And during that conference, I was literally able to knit the entire leg and the heel. I'd started the heel turn, but that was like at the end of the day. The other thing I will mention is this heel is quite a tall heel. So at first I had knit 60 rounds for the leg and then started the heel and it was like, whoa, this is very long. I think the heel adds, let's see, you're increasing 30 stitches and you're doing it over every other row. So that would be an extra 30 rows. So it does add quite a bit of height. So at first I did do 60 rows. I ended up ripping back those 10 rows and I did do the heel again because I was just like, I feel like this sock looks so ridiculously tall. And yeah, this is all the yarn I have left. Editing Kristen will put on the screen how much yarn I actually used because since I just finished these this morning, they have not been blocked, they have not been weighed, they have not been photographed. But I do think the colorway is very cool. And I'm excited about these. So I do think this is a heel I will be doing again. As I mentioned, I am knitting a pair of socks for myself to try out the heel as well. But yeah, overall is pretty easy to understand. I kind of like the mechanics of how you knit it. And it's kind of nice to have another sock heel in my arsenal of knitting knowledge. And then just for some accountability's sake, I do want to go over my stash stats for February. So some of these projects, like the socks I just showed you and the fiber I just showed you, finished in March. So they are not reflective in these stash stats. So these are my stash stats as of February. Again, in my goal is to use more yarn in a stash than what I bring into my house. And essentially, I'm trying to spin up roughly 4 ounces of fiber a month to end up with hopefully like a net of 0 at the end of the year because I have a fiber club where I get 4 ounces of fiber every month. So for February, I am at a -4 skeins out. And that was because I got 2 skeins of yarn in this month, but I got 6 skeins out from Shane's So Basic DK. So I ended the month with a -4. However, for year to date, I am at a +22, and that is because of some yarn that I got in January. Grams wise, I got 200 grams in, but 947 grams out. And that's because I did finish off a long-term project. I finally like wrapped up my cozy memory. I didn't bring that to show because it's essentially 1 square that I finished. If you're interested, you can go look at the project page. But I basically finished it cat size. I'm calling it done. I'm finishing that cozy memories, but that gets me a -747 grams for the year. Or for the month. For the year, I'm at a +241. So not as bad. And that's where you can see for the year I've brought in 1,400 grams, but I've brought in 31 skeins. And that's because a lot of those skeins are 50 gram skeins. So gram wise, I'm looking a little closer than when the skein numbers. Anyway, for fiber, as of February, I brought in 4 ounces of fiber, and year to date I've brought in 8 ounces of fiber. As of March, that should be a nice 0 until I get my next fiber club, so we'll be at a +4, but we're close. So those are my stash stats. I'm currently up for the year, but we should be able to bring it down, get out some of the stuff as we go along. Just a little accountability check. Just sharing it with you, some numbers. So then we'll just go on and move right into what I'm working on now. So I think we might as well stay on the sock train. So because I had a staff meeting and I knew those blue Regia socks were basically done. I had like 20 rounds and then the toe. And the training was 2 hours, and I was like, well, I definitely need more knitting. So I did cast on a new pair of socks, and this is using some of my oldest yarn. I pulled out one of the skeins that was sitting up here, and so this is the colorway Wash Your Face from Stranded Dye Works. They are no longer dyeing, but this is their Superwash BFL colorway. It is 80% Superwash BFL and 20% nylon. Fingering weight, the colorway is Wash Your Hands. This was when Stranded Dye Works had a Wash Your Hands and Don't Touch Your Face, which was at the beginning of our COVID era. The recommendations, you know, wash your hands, don't touch your face. And I have started this sock. I cast on 56 stitches, did a 2x1 rib, and I have started in the round. I mostly worked on those other socks during the training, so these haven't had a ton. However, I'm thinking the colorway is looking pretty cool. I feel like this is a little crazy for me now. It feels a little, I don't know, 70s, disco, chalk. Do you see what I'm getting at? I think it's fun. I'm excited now that I'm in the stockinette to kind of see how the colors will play a little bit more. I'm getting some like micro striping, but I am planning to do the vanilla is the new black heel on these to see how I like how it feels. And these will be some fun colorways. I think it's also branching out a little bit where I don't always use my hand dyed colorways for socks. Like I feel like they're too precious to like use for socks and I should put them in something else. But I should just use them. And this is the color where we're like, I would not wear like a hat in it. I don't know honestly what I would use this colorway for other than socks. So I might as well use some of the fun colors for socks. And if it's not for me, it's not for me. But it's fun to knit it up and to see where it's going. So again, knitting these on US zeros, 56 stitches. I'm probably going to do 40 rounds of leg on these for myself. because my feet are a little bit smaller. I have about a US 7 women's. So that's why my socks are a little bit smaller. And I just think, I did try on Shane socks, and they're a little, I mean, they're nice and tall, but I think 40 rounds might be a little bit better for me. So that's where these are at. Very, very brand new. Started them just like a day and a half ago. Very bright colorway. But it's kind of cool to see how, like, skein to sock. How it's translating up. So I'm excited to finally have some of this oldest yarn into some projects. I'm curious. I'm going to look to see, because I keep all my projects and I have all my stash in Ravelry, I can tell you when I bought this. Yeah, I bought this yarn in 2020, May of 2020, and so it is 2026. So it feels good to get some 6-year yarn out of my stash. And it's living in my beautiful sister bag. Technically this one's probably a little bit Christmassy, but this bag is just really easy to throw in my backpack and then take out and about when I need it. So that is my current pair of socks that are on the needles. My next work in progress is something I mentioned last time, but it was not a project yet. And this is my Finest Kind by Alicia Plummer. I have swatched and I've cast on, and this is where I'm at. So this is knit from the bottom up. It is a moss stitch kind of pattern. And I'm knitting this also for my husband Shane. And I know I just knit him a sweater, but I have been itching to make this sweater for so long that I was like, I'm just making it. So I am knitting this with Lion Brand's Fisherman's Roll, the same yarn that I used in this cardigan. And that's also because I'm just trying to use some of my stash. I want to make this sweater for Shane. I had this in stash, and so I was like, let's just do it. So I am knitting him the size D, which is a 48.5 inch size sweater. I'm knitting it on 5mm needles, which is a US 8, and so it is knitting up so quickly. With my gauge, I'm hitting gauge in the round with the US 8, and I'm getting the 16 stitches over the 4 inches. But when I swatched flat, I'm getting 17 stitches over the 4 inches. So when I do separate for the front and the back, I am planning to go up a needle size in order to not have the fabric tighten up. This is knit from the bottom up. It is a modified drop shoulder construction. So I will knit from the bottom up, and then I will knit the back. You do some shaping for the shoulders, you knit the front, you do the shaping for the shoulders and the neckline, and then you combine it the shoulders, and then we will pick up for the sleeves and knit down. It does have this little seam kind of at the edge, which I think looks really nice. And I also have my twice sheared sheep like knitting inch marker, so it just has a ruler. And so this is really helpful because I'm getting close-ish to the recommended length in the pattern when I will start doing some shaping. But this like helps me not measure like every 2 rounds. Because, you know, it gets hard to gauge, like, oh, am I at 10? Am I at 11? Am I at 12 inches? So that is helping. I also have the other stitch marker here for the other side seam. And then the only other modification I made is I did cast on with a provisional cast on with a barber cord. I don't even think you're going to be able to see it, but you can see that there's no ribbing on this right now. And my barber cord is hanging out right here. So my plan with this is I'm knitting the body to the length that's recommended. So I think it's saying, let's say it was 14 inches and the ribbing was 2. So I'm going to knit to 12. I'm going to follow all the recommended lengths, but then that way, once I finish the shoulders, I've combined it, I can have Shane try it on. I then can pick up from the provisional cast on And if I need to knit the ribbing to an inch, inch and a half, 2.5, I have a little more flexibility of controlling that final length. I will say the provisional cast on with the barber cord is literally the easiest cast on, because you literally put the barber cord on your needle, tuck it this direction so that essentially you're holding the barber cord and the needle together, and then you cast on with the very first cast on you used, the backwards E-loop, which doesn't work for like any other cast on. You don't use like a long tail or a German short row, none of that. You just literally do the backwards E cast on. Just pop them on. The video I watched I think 2 or 3, and they all recommended that cast on. I think it just gives enough give to go around the barber cord, but you don't end up with like that giant string at the end when you get to the end of the round. It's very interesting. The first couple of rounds were a little tight, just because I think it was just taking a little bit for like the stitches to kind of find their home on the barber cord. So I kept having to like move them around. But once I had about an inch of fabric, it was pretty smooth sailing. So we will see how the provisional goes. I've tried provisionals with the crochet hook, and I always manage with that one to somehow do it wrong, and then I'm having to like pull the yarn through instead of it just like unpicking. If you've done it before, maybe you know. I think I just do something incorrectly. And I think this will be nice, because essentially I will just pop it onto my needle and then slide it onto the stitches that are just like hanging out here. You can kind of see it. So yeah, because the gauge of this is so big, it grows so quickly. And I just love the texture. I love it so much. As I'm knitting it, I'm really loving working with the yarn. This is the color Oatmeal Heather. And I have this much of my first skein left. I am pulling from the inside. I'm being a rebel. It's Brown Heather, actually. I think this is Oatmeal Heather. So we're almost done with this skein, and yeah, my thought with this right now is I'm kind of thinking I'm going to use this as almost a giant swatch for myself, because as I'm knitting this, I think I want to find this kind for myself as well. And I have some chocolate brown fisherman's wool in my stash as well, and I'm like, well, I could knit that for myself after I knit this, but then I could kind of test how much, because I always need to shorten body length for myself because I have a short torso, and I'm knitting the same size for Shane that I would knit for myself, the 48.5. So I could kind of try this on, see how much length I would take out, and then I would know how much to take out when I knit it for myself. So it's kind of like my backup plan. Not even a backup plan. I think that's just the plan, because I'm loving this. This texture is so fun to knit. I thought like the stockinette and the round would be a little more enticing, but this is really just hitting a sweet spot right now. I'm really enjoying it. I think I have stalled out a little bit. That's just because I've started another project that has taken a little bit of my attention, but this is so fun. And I think that's all I have to say about it. I think the pattern's written very well. I mean, right now there's not a lot. It's just like get going. I will have a little more, you know, thought once we get to splitting for the front and the back and the shaping, but really enjoying this project overall. Then finally, I do have one more new work in progress to show you. I do also have another sweater that I'm not showing you today, and that's because I don't think I literally knit on it in the last month since I last chatted with you. So it's called the Popham Pullover. If you'd like to go to my Ravelry page, I will link it up above and in the show notes below. However, it looks exactly the same. So let me talk about my new love. And this is a Vertices Unite by Stephen West. I have just been wanting to do a Vertices Unite for a little bit. If you don't know what it is a 5 skein fingering weight shawl, and you just get to play with colors. It's modular, so you're doing increases and decreases and picking up, and each section is just like a little dopamine hit as you knit it. I've knit 2 before, and on the few cold days that we've had, I've been reaching for my one that I still have. The second one that I knit, it was a gift knit. So I have one that's currently in my rotation, and I was wearing it and I was just like, man, I want to make another one of these. So this is my first Vertices Unite. So I mean, it is a huge shawl, but it's so fun. This one I knit using a kit that I then added 1 extra color to. So this is like section 1. You have this giant triangle that you make, that you stripe 2 colors, and then you have section 2 with some striping, but it's like long and skinny. And then section 3, you really just like show off a color. It's just a giant rectangle of a color. And then sections 4, 5, and 6 are smaller sections, but you kind of just get a replay with some colors. You have another like solid color. You then stripe a few more, and then you have, is this solid as well? Yeah. So this one is really, you know, it's orangey, it's earthy, it's fun. I love this shawl because you can really like wrap it around, and it doesn't take a lot of fuss to look nice, and it really just is like a nice pop of color. So the idea came into my head that I really wanted to make another one. And so what honestly took me the longest is I played with colors. I played with so many options. I kind of came down to like these final 10. I posted them on my Instagram stories. You know, do you like A? Do you like B? And then I was like, oh, I could also combine them together, kind of mix it up. So picking what colors I wanted took a few days. I ended up like just leaving them on my floor. I kept coming back to them, rearranging them, trying to settle on a color palette, and then I finally did. And now I finally cast on, and I've just been enjoying knitting this so much. I'm still on section 1, but I did start this February 25th. So it's probably been on the needles a little over 2 weeks. It is living in my redesigned bag because this bag is really nice for multiple skeins of yarn. I can fit all 5 and the shawl pretty easily. So maybe we'll talk about colors first. My first 2 colors for section 1, I like don't know where to put this, are these 2. And again, I have pulled some old stash for this, so I'm pretty excited. This Ellen colorway is by Chromatic Yarns, and it is one of the oldest skeins of my stash. And then I have Stress Knits Old Pine, and so I'm holding these 2 together for section 1. And this is where we're at. So for section 1, you do a giant triangle where you stripe your first 2 colors. And I have a very low contrast. I tried some of the higher contrast, but I really like this. So my first Vertices Unite is very orangey yellows, you know, kind of like warm tones. This one I went a lot more cool tones, mints, blues. So these 2 colors, you can like kind of see the difference, but really they're just like blending together in this, which is kind of what I wanted. So I'm currently on the decreases. I will be decreasing down. Section 2 is one where you do some striping. And so my plan is these 2 colors. And all these colors are listed on my project page, but we have a Les Garçons Yak, and then Playful Day Yarns, this like gray blue. So I'm planning to stripe these 2 together. And the reason I kind of went with this brown is because it kind of pulls out some of the browns that are in this mint Ellen. Like it has some browns. The old pine also has some like dark green brown specks, so I thought that just all coordinated well. I also just felt like these three together play really well. So, you know, we're feeling cohesive. And then my section 3, which is the big rectangle section, that, I mean, like this is where this color shines. It's not used anywhere else, is my Needles at the Ready Winter Forest, which again pulls in those blues and browns. So this is my entire palette. I really tried to focus on having some colorways that, like this one was really heavily variegated, so trying to pull the other ones to be, you know, the brown and the blue are very tonal or like less variegated, but the old pine has a little bit of variation, but not a ton. It is very hard to hold up 5 skeins of yarn at one time. But I think the color palette just works. Like, I think every color plays with each other in some way, shape, or form. Like these two I would not stripe because they're both the variegated ones. But otherwise, I think everything just kind of plays together with enough variation. So yeah, my initial plans are these two are being striped together. These two will be a high contrast section when they're striped together, but it'll be that long section. And then this section can kind of just sing by itself. And then we'll have a little more intermingling of some of these will stripe and then some of them will be their own colors. I don't know section 4, 5, and 6 where they'll go. But this pattern is just a fun one to play with colors. It's fun to get 5 skeins out of my stash. And it's honestly just so fun. Like, I kept wanting to work on this because you just keep increasing and increasing and increasing. And now I'm like, oh, now I'm decreasing. And then I'll come back and I'll pick up stitches. And then I remember section 2 goes pretty quickly because it's long, but there's not a ton of rows. Section 3, I think, is the one that you're not striping and it's a big section. So that one can kind of drag on, but overall, I'm so excited. So yes, this is my Vertices Unite. My current like obsession. It is the project that I am reaching for. It is the project that is bringing me so much joy. It is the one that is pushing all the other projects to the side right now. Which is why part of me is like, should I start a jaunty right now? I mean, I got a lot of projects happening. I mean, I guess I don't have a ton. I have like 4. 2 sweaters, a shawl, and a sock. But having one more might be too many. My focus is already diverted, but who knows? Knitting is knitting. I don't need to be stressed. I do have some spinning and sewing that I would like to do. I'm planning to take a long weekend next weekend for like my quarterly time off. Just taking some time, and I just want to like sew. We're not really going on a trip. I don't want to spend money, and I don't have the brain space to like plan a trip right now. But the idea of like staying home and making for a long weekend for like 6 days in a row, sewing, knitting, just like chilling out, having some like, that's like my plan. So I do have some spinning that I'm hoping I can do. I have some patterns that I've printed. I just need to like trace and sew. Yeah, that's where we're at. Those are all of my projects with the progress that I have to show you. You know, there's always things lingering, but that is what I have to share with you today. So let me know what you've been up to, and how was your February? How is your March going now? How's daylight savings been treating you? Again, as always, if you've made it this far, thank you for hanging out with me. You spending your time with me is valuable, and I love that you decide to spend it with me. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. You can subscribe to make sure you don't miss my future videos. And otherwise, I hope that you've put a little bit of love into every stitch of your making while we hung out today. And as always, I hope that you can find some knit life balance. And I'll see you again very soon.